This is Illuminate, the podcast about men with good hearts, open minds, and a desire to make the world better. Welcome to Illuminate. I'm your host, Chris Tidrick, and I'm here with Rich Excell. After a career in investment banking and hedge funds that spanned 30 years and saw him live and work in 5 countries outside the U.S., Rich has settled down and is now in his 7th year of teaching finance and leading multiple academies at the Gies College of Business at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Chris, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this discussion. It should be a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this. You were one of the first people who kind of jumped at my invitation last spring. I think I put one out on LinkedIn, and I think you were one of the people from LinkedIn that jumped in. Obviously, we are colleagues as well at Gies, so I've known you for a while. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation because we've interacted professionally, but I don't really know you sort of as a person and a human. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. The thing that I do first off is dive right in and talk about motivation. So tell me about your why. Where do you find purpose and what drives you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, so I'll tell you where I find my why right now is in helping other people. And so let me tell you why. So I spent early part of my career kind of doing what everyone else does, right? Chasing fame, chasing fortune, chasing, as Thomas Aquinas tells us that we try to find happiness in money, power, pleasure, and honor. And I did all of that. And then you only find real happiness when you really try to help other people. And I didn't realize that. I stumbled into that maybe. But now that I have found that absolutely, I can totally see that. And that is definitely gives me happiness. And so whether it's, like you said, working at Gies and teaching or in the other things I do in my life, that's what I spend all my time doing. And me, selfishly, it makes me happy. But I think hopefully I'm having a bigger impact as well than I did in what I was doing before. So that's what drives me and drives me to do the different things that I do now.
That's fantastic. That's just a wonderful piece of motivation. So, you talked a little bit about, chasing fame and fortune early on, and we're all made of our experiences, the good ones and the bad ones, the mistakes and the successes. So talk a little bit about what those significant moments were in your life that really made you who you are today.
So I went to it wasn't Gies then, but I went to Illinois as an undergrad, and I wanted to go to work on Wall Street. I wanted to do that since I first heard about Wall Street. I started caddying when I was young, and I was hearing the people talk about it on the golf course, and so that's what I thought I wanted to do, and I was able to do that. I was able to do that while I interned during school, and then I got a chance to do it right out of school. And that's what really took me abroad, because I had studied abroad in Japan. So I learned Japanese. And so 1990, when I graduated, Japan was at that time the biggest stock market in the world, which I think probably shocks a lot of people. But so I got sent to Asia, and that's really where I began. What I would say, I kind of look back on it now and laugh. You say things kind of shape you, but I basically spent my entire career going from crisis to crisis. And so let me explain that here. So as I mentioned, I moved to Japan in 1990 at the top of the market in Japan, and it turned in, and ultimately Japan's stock market and economy didn't surpass that level again until just this past year, right? So that's how long Japan's been in malaise. Then I moved back to the U.S. briefly to focus on European markets, and that was during the European exchange rate meltdown. And so then they moved me to focus on emerging Latin American emerging markets, and that was during the tequila crisis. And I moved back to Asia just in time for the Asian financial crisis and navigated through that. And then came back to the U.S. And just in time for the tech bubble to burst. Then I got moved overseas back to Europe in time for the financial crisis. And then I decided to step out of the world of financial markets, et cetera, and move into teaching just in time for COVID. And so just about everywhere I've gone, every time I've made a big move, there's been some sort of seismic change that's gone on. And I think the reason I say that kind of helps kind of define who I am, because of course I had nothing to do with those crises. So I had to learn how to navigate it. It really helps one become adaptable, right? You kind of move into a situation expecting a certain set of conditions to continue. And because of these exogenous shocks or whatever, they don't continue. And so then you have to adjust on the fly and figure it out. And so I think it's really having a career like that has really, and being able to do it in a lot of different places has really helped form me to be a lot more adaptable and a lot more open-minded. And maybe, maybe also someone who's always thinking when I look in a situation about what's going to change, because every time I've been in a situation, things have kind of changed dramatically. I think from another standpoint, though, is professionally, being able to kind of navigate through all those different crises has really helped form my opinion, my process. It's given me a lot of different things I can talk about in the classroom. It's given me a lot of things I can talk about on my own podcast or my own blogs, et cetera. And so it's really helped give me a perspective or a lens through which I can see the world maybe from several different perspectives, and not really just myopically through only one lens or one viewpoint. And so that's where I would say that while it was never fun going through each of those crises, and I have a lot of gray hair to kind of prove it, it was definitely formative. And I wouldn't really, looking back on it, I wouldn't want it any other way, because I think it's actually really helped make me maybe a little bit better at what I do.
Yeah, as you were describing all the different financial crises that you went through, I kind of had this picture of you as like the Forrest Gump of financial crisis. Instead of doing all the big political moments, you were doing all the big financial crises. And it also gave me a little bit of a flashback, because I started college in 1989. And I was fully intending on being an econ major with a minor in Japanese, because Japan was this like incredible economy. And I realized that economics was incredibly boring to me and Japanese was incredibly hard. And so I ended up switching to political science, but it does kind of flood back some memories of that sort of ambitious time in my life.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I loved my time in Japan. It's an amazing country. In fact, I'm really excited because I'm going to be bringing a group of students back to Japan and Singapore, two places where I lived. In May, we're going to go on a trip there and see some things. But I just think that was it absolutely is. It was a fun, informative time. And you're right. It is. My Japanese is absolutely a little rusty, having not used it now in about 20 years or so. But we'll have to get on Duolingo, I guess, for the next several months.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. So anything else, sort of pivotal moments in your life that you'd want to share? You talked a lot about on the professional side. Anything on the personal side that sort of shaped who you are today?
Well, I've been married now. I just had my 33rd anniversary.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. And have 3 kids. And so, my wife has, she wasn't with me when I first moved over to, actually interesting story. So I moved over to Japan right out of college. And then I came back briefly. And then one day my boss at work was like, we want you to move back to Asia. And we want you to move back to Singapore this time. I'm not so sure when you're going to come back. And so I said, well, I'm probably going to have to get engaged, because I did the long distance relationship from when I was in Japan and my girlfriend was in Chicago. He's like, okay, well, let me know tomorrow morning. I'm like, okay, I guess I got to make a decision. He's like, I pay you to make quick decisions, so make a quick decision. So proposed that night, and then I left less than a month later to go to Singapore. I came back 2 months after that, got married, and we turned around and went back. So that whole engagement was about 3 months long. And she's stuck with me through, obviously through all those different travails and trips around the world. And a couple of our kids were born overseas, and they've all lived overseas. And so I think not only kind of going through all of those different experiences on my own, but going through all those different experiences with a young family or a family of kids in middle school. And you can imagine how it is coming home and telling your kids in middle school that we're going to take them away from all their friends and move overseas. Lots of tears, but lots of tears on the way coming back too, because they learned that they can make new friends. And so I think always having that focus of getting married relatively young and having kids relatively young, certainly colored my perspective for sure. And it leads you to make certain decisions, right? Some of my friends were going off to start their own companies when they're in their late 20s, but I already had a couple kids at that point. So I'm like, no, that kind of stick around as a company man. So absolutely no regrets. But it does, you make certain decisions and take certain paths. But I think it also, in the midst of all of that, like I said, it was a lot of being on Wall Street or the equivalent in those different countries can really kind of takes people and help them and make them lose perspective, I think. And it certainly is, there's a lot of things that will take you away from who you need to be. And I think one of the things that helped maybe ground me a little bit, I mean, I certainly could lose my way at times, but one of the things that grounded me was the fact that I had a wife and kids at home, and I had to think about them too.
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about a lot on this podcast is this idea of, what does it look like to be a healthy man in today's world? So can you talk a little bit about that and, kind of let me know what your perspective is on that?
For sure. I think to me, what it takes to be healthy is you have to have balance. I think, like I said before, I all those times I was kind of chasing, money, power, fame, etc. It was really being very, very career centric, etc. Moving up the ranks. You're like, this is all what's important. Coming from nothing, now to me, that was what's important. I had to be a provider, etc. But I was really too focused on just that one aspect of who I could be, right? And so I think in order to be healthy, you have to have balance. You have to focus on a career. You have to, if you're given talents, you need to, it's on you to get the most out of those talents. But I think at the same time, you have to have that perspective that, we have more than one vocation, and one of the other vocations is called to be a family man, et cetera, making sure that your kids are also, being raised in the right way, and that, giving back to the community in some, a lot of different ways. And so I think that balance of knowing, when to spend a little time on yourself, but also when to focus on your family, and then when to either yourself or with the family give back, is I think just trying to find that balance. And it's the same way as you would, like, sometimes, you have to, you have to work, but you have to exercise, right? And so it's the same thing. The same things you would think about with your own health. I think you need that not just for your physical health, but for your mental and spiritual health too. Is trying to find that what is that right cadence and right balance. And I think, to me, that's where I see people that struggle, that I meet that are struggling with that. I think it's because they don't have everything in balance or proportion. It's probably too lopsided one way or the other, and that's causing some stresses in the other points. And so that's where, if I can help, I would always try to help. And again, it's not because I'm all knowing or anything like that. It's because I've made those mistakes myself, and I want to help people learn from my mistakes.
How do you, you work with students at the university, and you teach in finance, and I think there's this stereotype, whether it's earned or not, of like the finance bro that's super
sure.
driven.
We're in Patagonia vest typically, yeah.
Yeah, right. We're in Patagonia. Yes, I was actually just out shopping with my wife yesterday, and we saw a Patagonia vest, and I'm like, oh, I can get a Patagonia vest and fit in with the finance department. And so there's this stereotype out there, but underneath that stereotype are real human beings and real young men and women. But I want to ask you specifically about the young men. Like, how do you interact with them, and like, how do you help them sort of not get caught up in that money, power at all costs sort of stereotype?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that has evolved for me, right? When I first came in and started teaching, I thought that the only time I would have to spend would be on the content in the classroom, et cetera. I wasn't, thankfully, when I went through kind of the bridge program, et cetera, like kind of learning how to teach type of ideas, I realized I'm not, it's not my job to just dispense content, but to teach people how to think critically about that content and how to apply that content, et cetera. But I really thought that my duties, if you will, my responsibilities ended at the classroom. But what I realized early on was that my office hours were always busy and no one ever wanted to come and talk about class. They always wanted to come and talk about their careers or, how they should be, maybe what certifications or classes they should take to set them on a certain path. I even have students that in the last few years that they have graduated that now maybe making a move into their second or even third jobs, and they're texting me and asking me for advice because maybe they don't have some don't have a father, they don't have a man in their life like that, or maybe they have parents that have given them everything, but really just aren't that knowledgeable in what they are doing. Because we know we have a lot of first generation college students, et cetera. So they're hardworking people, but they just don't know a lot about the world of finance. And so the students feel like they want to come and ask me for advice and career advice, et cetera. And so I've seen more and more that opportunity, if you will, to really start talking about things beyond just, this is what you need to do to get a grade, and you need to stack all of these things together to get a good degree, to get a good job, et cetera. And that topic comes up a lot. In fact, I interviewing for our investment management academy, I had a student notice that that one of the things on my LinkedIn is the work that I do with my church, and he said, "Hey, I'm the same religion. How do you keep your faith in this?" I'm like, it's hard, right? You're going to be drawn and pushed in a lot of different directions, so you have to be very intentional about it. And you have to realize that you're going to have a lot of things that are going to try to take you away from that. And it's kind of getting back to the idea of balance. But I think it's really not thinking that, okay, it's going to all fall together. You have to be really focused and intentional and not not allow yourself to be drawn. And again, I say that as someone who did, from the mistakes, learn from my mistakes type of thing. Right. And so what I do is where that discussion oftentimes comes up is when students are either asking me about, what's the right career path? And there isn't one right career path, right? We've got a lot of successful alums that come back and engage with the university, and they went and did very different things. Some were in real estate, some were investment banking, some were investment management. Even within investment management, there's a lot of different ways you could go. Some were in consulting. There's so many different avenues. There's so many different ways to be successful. You have to find the one, as I tell them, you have to find the one that speaks to you, that matches your skills, sure, but also is something that you really enjoy doing. Because if you don't enjoy doing it, you're not going to be able to put in the number of hours that you need to be successful. But if you do enjoy doing it, when you are asked to work 50 or 60 hours a week, or in some parts of it 100, 120 hours a week, you'll put in those hours at that time, just because you enjoy. There's something about it that you enjoy, and it's going to motivate you, and you're going to be good at it. And then you can work, because that balance, when we talk about work-life balance, I think it's a continuum, right? You're not going to find it over the course of any single day or any single week, but you try to find it over the course of a year, right? There's going to be periods when you're super busy and periods when you maybe can get that things back in order. But it's usually about what's the right career path, and then making sure that they don't chase things. Just because, I want to go into this career path because I hear that's great. Well, that might be great for some people, may not be great for you. Or don't chase things just because of the money, because the money will come at some point if you need to. And if you're doing something simply for the money because it's more mercenary like that, there's no way you're going to find happiness. And so you're gonna not have a lot of longevity in that particular role if that's the only reason you're doing it. So more and more, I'd really try to focus on just kind of getting, not just getting them a good start, but getting them to think a little bit about how their career might iterate and progress, and knowing that the first job that they take isn't going to be their last job. It's the beginning of their journey that's going to go forward. Heck, nowadays, though, as long as people are living, they might be working for 50 years, right? Or I might take over every job and they might be working for 2. I don't know, but they're going to probably have a long career. And so you don't want to only worry about what's that first job look like. And so that's where I think that discussion, the door is open for me to really talk about how you want to think about prioritization, not just now, but intentionally, as you kind of move along your career.
And hopefully they listen to you and sort of absorb what you're saying and like listening from your experience. But I like harken back to 21, 22-year-old Rich, and would he have listened to that same advice at the time? And so you've gone through a lot of growth, right, in your life and realization. And sometimes in my experience, real growth always requires some sort of deconstruction. Like it's something that you've held really closely, very deeply. And then you just have to say, that's not for me anymore, and move on from it. Give me some examples of, those types of growth that you've had where you've had to really discard something that you held very deeply.
Well, I think the biggest thing is just the focus on me, right? I think early on, certainly through high school, college, early career, all I really cared about was me and making sure that I was optimizing my personal situation. And if others came along for the ride, that's great, but this is what I need to do, right? Whether, that was, and even sometimes, not even fully appreciating how others around me were helping me be the best I could. Going back is I started caddying when I was 11 years old, right? I was kind of a little bit into golf. My parents were into golf, and so this was a good thing. And then, there were a lot of incentives, caddies. If you earn so many points, you get certain prizes at the end of the year. But then, back then if you were the top caddies, you could caddy in the Western Open for the pros. And so I was motivated to do that. And I ended up, all summer long, I'd be at the golf course from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. sometimes, right? Just trying to earn those points, et cetera. But I was 11 years old. It was dark on the way there, dark on the way home. That means my parents had to wake up early and get me there, and then they had to stick around and come and pick me up. And I don't know if I ever really said thank you enough for them doing that, because I was really focused on what I was doing, right? And so, yeah, when you asked it, would 21 or 22-year-old Rich taking that advice? No, I think I know I've said to a lot of people that I didn't realize how smart my parents were until I was like 30 years old and had a couple of kids. Because then I could start to realize that, hey, all that stuff they were saying made a lot of sense, right? And I think that was the wake up call for me, is like, no, that you have to really think about these things. And that was, again, taking that focus away from me and putting it back and bringing a little bit of that balance. I didn't completely lose it, but I think brought that balance back a little bit more. And then probably the other thing that my parents always did, I was raised in a house that was really faith-based and focused a lot. My mom taught Catholic school. And so, it was really big focus for us. But as with anyone in college and early 20s, you kind of lose that. And all along, it was like my parents were nudging me to move back towards that. And I think that it wasn't probably until, we did the same with our kids, but, you can be involved, but not involved, if you know what I mean. Right? You're kind of going, ticking the boxes, but not really doing everything you need to. And just in the last less than 10 years, 7 years, has really become a bigger focus for me. And as it has, it's really shifted that to getting to that, when I talked about what's my motivation, what's my why, that whole idea of, as St. John tells us, love is willing the good of another. And we're told that we have to love God and love our neighbors. And so loving the neighbors, meaning willing the good of another. And as I kind of really took that to heart, it's something I would have learned in high school theology class. But as I finally started to live that way, I realized that actually, and I could see the impact it had, you realize that that's when you become the best version of yourself, is when you kind of get away from yourself and focus on others. And it's so hard to do. Trust me, I know it's so hard to do. But when you finally do, and you're like, I don't care about those other things. I don't care about those things I was chasing. And I'm like, I didn't get into teaching because I wanted to have an impact. I really didn't. I got into teaching because I came down to campus. I talked to Jeff Brown, I talked to Louis Chan, a couple of our colleagues. And they're like, hey, why don't you come and talk to a class? And then it was like, why don't you do a research project with a class? And before you know it, it's like, why don't you teach a class? And then next, it's like a frog in a pot of water, right? You slowly turn up. and now this year, I think I have 10 classes, 8 different preps. So I'm more than a little busy on campus. But I've never been happier, because we were at the end of the semester party a week and a half ago. And when the students is like, what's the best job you ever had? I'm like, the job I have right now is the best job I've ever had. And one of the other students immediately jumped in. She's like, no, don't answer that. You have to answer something else, because you're like, she goes, that's too trite. I'm like, but it's true. It's totally true. And then, I was teaching and working and super busy. And my wife was like, I know you usually take on too much, but you're really busy right now. What's going to give? I'm like, I think I want to focus on teaching. I'm just kind of happier after a day of teaching. And I didn't know why I was happier, but I knew I was. And then now, as I kind of got more involved, and as you said, kind of having those discussions with students about things outside the classroom, and starting to see, and then people coming back and texting you later and telling you about the success they've had because of a class they took or something like that. That's what keeps me going. That's why I teach more than I have to. It's not because it's just because those types of things motivate me to say, okay, if I can do that, let's do that in as many ways as I can, as long as I have the energy. And so I think getting away from the focus on me and focusing on others, which has been a journey, right? It's been a 25 plus year journey to do that. But now that I'm at that point, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I've had a similar journey in the way that, like, early in my career, it was just all about me. But it has been so much more satisfying now that I've been able to, like, flip that script and do things for others and help people grow and, help them advance their careers. It's like night and day more satisfying. But I wonder if that's really hard to do when you're young. Like, I think there's a privilege in being able to help people. It means you already have everything that you need yourself, right? And you can flip that. So it's harder to do when you're young and you don't have, maybe the financial means to be as helpful. So how do you think that, had you had this realization earlier in life, you would have, like, acted on it? Or is there some, like, point in life where you have to get to before this switch can flip?
I think yes. I don't think that helping. It's nice to be in a place where you don't have to worry as much about materiality, but we know from the research that it's really incomes. You only need so much, and the incremental happiness doesn't go up the more money you make, right? So yeah, you have to be at some level to have that happiness and take away some of the stress. But what do I think? I think, as I look back on it, I think it's because of how I was raised. So here we are, Christmas time, right? And to your point, it's easier to be, to give when you're older. You're much happier giving Christmas gifts than you are getting Christmas gifts at my age, for sure, right?
Yep.
10 years old, no chance. Of course, you're much happier getting gifts, right? Probably, I don't even know when that stopped. Probably, I don't know, 20, 25, I don't know. So at some point it switched. I don't know when it did. But here we are at Christmas time. But again, here we are. We're not quite in winter, but it feels like with all the snow we've had. When growing up, when it was whatever snow outside, my parents are like, you're shoveling the entire block, because we had a bunch of older neighbors. Like, you're shoveling the whole block. When I had to cut the parents' grass, I'm cutting everyone's grass. I'm like, but they don't pay me. They're like, cut their grass, etc. I'm like, they were instilling in me the need to do that, and it was everything, even like little chores or whatever. And I don't think I had any more than anyone else, but they were instilling in me that you have to think more about than just the immediacy of what you have to do. If you have the ability to just go and help shovel or go and help cut the grass, you don't even know the benefit that's going to help, it can provide to somebody. And now with elderly, aunts, uncles, and mother-in-law, et cetera, you realize that I wish there was a kid in the block who just shovel their snow, so that, because obviously the 80-year-old can't do it, and not all their kids can't always get over and do it either. And so that little thing, now you think back on it, like, wow, they actually made me do that. And so I think there is a base in there that makes it easier for that switch to flip. I don't think if you have that kind of upbringing, it comes naturally. I think if you do, it's kind of buried in you a little bit, but it kind of percolates a little bit at some point. And what's the catalyst? Who knows what the catalyst is? I do think it takes some intentionality about trying to find that balance. We talk about that healthy life, if you will. And when you think about that, you're like, okay, well, what else could I be doing? And so, and yeah, maybe it is, giving away some clothes, buying something off the tree, the gift tree at church for Christmas for another family, or, those things like that. But I also think there's the gift of time that you can give somebody, which is a precious gift for all of us because we all feel way too busy, of course. But if you can take some time to do that, it makes probably a much bigger difference than a lot of people think.
Yeah. So you mentioned your neighborhood, and it just felt like my neighborhood growing up too. Like we were helping each other out, and you'd go shovel driveways, and the kids were all playing out in the street in the summertime, and like that community is very different nowadays. Like it's just, and the pandemic certainly, like these things were happening before the pandemic. I think the pandemic exacerbated a sense of isolation in our society, in our communities. So I think people are really struggling to find community. So I like talking to men about where they find communities. So like you mentioned your church, but other places that you find community? Well,
yeah, first, definitely my church. We spend a lot of time there, just in a lot of the different organizations and groups within it. I do a lot with my colleagues at U of I, because as you know, I'm specialized faculty, so I commute down to Champaign from the Chicago suburbs. But there's a number of us that live in the Chicago suburbs, and so we get together. They're all alums, and so a lot of the Illinois alums is a pretty tight network, and so we're together quite a bit, and I think we kind of have a lot of shared values, and so I think that makes it nice. Not only do we have now a shared kind of job that we do, but it's common friends growing up, et cetera. Certainly a love for Illinois sports, as frustrating as that can be at times.
It's been pretty good lately.
It's been very good lately. As I tell the students, I'm like, if Illini sports are good when you're here, you have to come back and teach, right? And you haven't told anyone that since 2005. Like, so a lot of us that are teaching there now that are alums graduated in like 88, 89, 90, when the teams were good back then. And so it's a generational gap, it seems, between when Illinois sports are good. I do a lot. One of the things I do, I focus a lot on financial markets, market commentator, whatever, podcasts, blogs, things I write on LinkedIn, other social media. So I do a lot with that, and focus on that is really, again, it's more about educating. It's making sure that whether it's my podcast for the CFA Society, it's educating our members on different things that are going on in the world that they need to know about. Again, those of us, there's a few of us that do that, and we're just doing it just to help other people out. We get nothing from it. It keeps you sharp, because you have to think about these things and talk about them. But that's kind of a combined benefit. And then I mentioned golf. I do a lot with the Western Golf Association. So I was a caddy. The Western Golf Association's always had a caddies to college program where I was a beneficiary of that. I got a full ride to school because of it. And so now I'm trying to help get other kids full rides. And it's the largest privately funded college scholarship in the country. And so I spend a lot of time mentoring those kids, finding them, training them, raising money for it. So that's, again, another one where it's made a difference in my life. And so I'm trying to give back a little bit on that. All of those that's probably, things that I've all interwoven into different things that I've done, whether it's golf or, again, raised in a church, spent a lot of time on a golf course, went to U of I, spent a lot of time in the financial markets. And those are the big organizations that are still very much involved in, just in a different capacity.
What does male friendship look like to you? I'm incredibly interested in like all the different answers the guests on this podcast have given to that, because I think it's very unique in some ways to each individual of like what male friendship means to them in their lives. Friendship to me, and I'm blessed that I have a number of great friends, and all met during my time at U of I. It just, friendship to me is like you're willing to drop everything and help the other person out. And I've seen that time and time again, where when I've needed it,
they've dropped everything and come and helped. And I see it with all the different people in that group. When they've needed everything, they're immediately there, no matter what's going on in their own life. And so to me, it's just that selflessness, but that's where you're just willing to just kind of do whatever you have to do to make sure that person taking care of it, and just really looking out not just for them but for their whole families as well. It's like having that kind of extended family network, and I had two sisters growing up. I didn't have any brothers. And so to me, all these friends that I have that are willing to help in anything are, a dozen brothers that I didn't have. And so that to me is what it is, what it looks like. And like I said, I'm really blessed because we are close. We stay in touch with each other. Our wives all know each other well. The families know each other well. So it really is kind of an extended family. And spend, that to me, that's just what it's all about. It's just thinking a good friend is really just an extension of your family, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So now we're going to enter what I call the slow rolling thunder round, because it's never fast enough for lightning. But it's 12 questions intended to be relatively short answers, but we might dive into a couple things if something interesting pops out of there. So question number 1, what are your top 3 values?
Top 3 values. I would say the way I think of them, I would say humility, intellectual curiosity, and work ethic.
What's your favorite emotion?
My favorite emotion, I would say, is probably contentment.
When do you feel that the most?
Well, and I say, and again, I don't want to go too long here, but I would say
feel free to dive in. Yeah.
I'm not the happy rah guy. So when I'm watching an Illinois basketball game, and my family always gives me a hard time. If they're not doing well, I'm usually pretty upset. If they are doing well, I'm just really kind of peaceful and content. And so to me, when I'm kind of at peace or content, that's when I'm feeling my best. I'm not going to be jumping up and down, rah, et cetera. And it's the same thing in whenever, like whether it's a family moment where, we'll be around the Christmas table, or where, even if it's like success on a golf course, it's just more of an inner peace that I feel. It's not like, a surge of emotions. It's just that contentment. And when I feel that contentment, I know good things are happening.
Fantastic. What's your least favorite emotion?
Impatience.
When are you your most impatient?
I am my most impatient almost all the time. I struggle with that quite a bit, which is why I don't like it. Is I'm naturally an impatient person. I don't know if that's nature, nurture, or both, but I naturally don't have patience. I really get frustrated sitting in traffic, things like that. It's just something that and whether it's with people or situations or things not getting done on time, or like I said, sitting in traffic, or whatever it is, waiting on the tarmac for a plane to take off, I always get that sense of impatience, and I struggle with that. I know I shouldn't be. I know I'm told all the time by my family that I shouldn't be, but I am.
Where can you feel the most yourself?
On the golf course, for sure. That is definitely my happy place. When I'm on the golf course either if I'm with friends, family, or if I'm just by myself. Sometimes I'll just be out on the golf course, carry my bag, and on a beautiful day, that is my happy place. I can be listening to music while I'm doing that, or just kind of enjoying all the sounds of nature, whatever. To me, just being out on nature, on the golf course in a beautiful day, getting a little exercise and playing that frustrating game they call golf is definitely my happy place.
So I'm glad you mentioned the frustrated part, because as a freshman at Notre Dame, we had to take PE as freshmen, and I took a 3-week section on golf, and it was the most frustrating thing I've ever done in my entire life. It was just I personally find it impossible to think that you could feel like peace in yourself on a golf course, because the game is so frustrating. So how do you manage that? I live on a golf course now. Like the 5th hole of the Lincolnshire Fields golf course is our backyard. And so I see all the different behaviors out on the golf course, and most of it's not happy-go-lucky. It's not. Yeah. So how do you deal with that?
It's all about setting expectations. And I think that's what you have to really focus on, because I've played in a number of pro-am golf tournaments on the AM side, of course, but and I'm always talking to the pros, and I'm asking them, like, how many shots do you hit the way you'd expect over the course of a round, right? And these are the best players in the world, and they say about 5 or 6. So if the best players in the world who are spending hours and hours and hours a day are only hitting about 6 shots where they want in the round of golf, why should I expect to hit even one shot the way I want? Right now, of course, their misses are better than, when we miss, it's way worse than our good shots, etc. The variance for us is way different for them. But I just think it's about level setting those expectations and saying, okay, what am I trying to achieve today? And so to me, it's all about. That's why I enjoy getting out there with the good friends and just having some sort of game, some sort of competition, because it doesn't typically, and most of those competitions around golf, as you know, if you play it, it's like, it's usually some sort of hole by hole competition. Yes, they might add up into, but that allows, because everyone knows, the people who design the games know that golf is, you're going to have bad holes. You're always going to have bad holes. And so you have to, you just have to be able to kind of forget about it and put it behind you and move on, like I say, next hole, right? And, or as Ted Lasso would say, you have to have a memory of a goldfish, which I found interesting, because I just read a research report that said, because of social media, et cetera, humans now have an attention span that's shorter than a goldfish. So maybe, I don't know if Ted Lasso has to rephrase that, but it's, again, whenever you have a bad hole, and you will have them, I will have them. If I play 1,000 holes of golf next summer, I will have far more bad holes than good holes. But it's about expectation setting. Like, okay, are you willing to put in the thousands of hours of practice to have fewer bad holes, or are you just willing to deal with a few of them and just try to enjoy the surroundings?
I'm glad I dug into that, because that's a really great life lesson there. So what's one way you try to make the world a better place for others?
I would say, I mean, I don't know. I think I try to help others or make the world a better place by helping them learn from my mistakes, kind of what I talked about before. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done a lot of things well too, but I've made a lot of mistakes. And if I can help others learn from that, then I think they have to make their own mistakes too. And then same, whether it's friends or kids or whoever, they're going to make their own mistakes, and then sometimes you need to, right? But if I can just help somebody out, and that's what I do on my LinkedIn, my chart of the day is really just trying to help people, like, learn from the mistakes that I've made. And like, this is what I'm seeing and thinking. Do with it what you want, but this is kind of how this is where I would be careful, et cetera. So, and so I think helping people learn from my mistakes.
What do you want other men to see in you?
The thing that I hope that they see in me, that has always been kind of what I pride myself in, is leading by example. So even when I had a lot of people reporting to me, I would never ask people to do something that I wouldn't do myself. If they were working a lot of hours, I'm working just as many hours right next to them, et cetera, working with them. If I'm asking my students to hold themselves to standard and put in certain amounts of effort, I'm doing the same amount for them. Whatever it is, I don't ask of others anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. Kind of going back to that's why I value work ethic above anything else. And as I tell my students, I'm like, you'll always find somebody smarter than you, but you should never find someone who works harder than you. And I live by that. I don't just tell them that. I'm like, you can't take that away. They can't take work ethic away from you. We're all given other talents, and you might have some and others might have more, but you can work as hard or harder than anybody else. And I tried, that's definitely in my genes. And I try to kind of bring that across to other people too.
What makes you the most proud of yourself?
Oh, my kids, for sure. I think we're all ultimately, again, we all think that what matters is ourselves, but you think about anybody, and no matter how successful that person is, they're ultimately judged by their kids, right? Yeah, whatever famous athlete, like LeBron, he's being judged by, the success of his son on the basketball court, or Michael Jordan the same way. Everyone can have their own success, but we're all judged by our kids, and so I think I take pride in my kids. My kids have all been terrifically successful, in large part due to their mother and their own talents. But if anyone sees me and starts a conversation about how things are going, it is almost always my kids come up, because that's what I'm the most proud of, for sure.
Fantastic. So aside from working on your impatience, what's your greatest opportunity for growth or improvement?
Ooh, that's a tough one. My greatest opportunity for improvement, et cetera, would certainly be working on my physical fitness, I would say right now. If I say one thing's really out of balance in my life, I got to spend a little bit more time on the physical fitness. And going back to my kids, because I just told you it would always come down to my kids. We have a wedding next year, and so I have to make sure that I look good for those wedding pictures that are going to be around for posterity. As we're going through my parents' old stuff, you're finding wedding pictures from 100 years ago. I'm like thinking to myself, someone's going to find a wedding picture from me in 100 years, and I better look good. So that's my 2026 focus.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I don't think we're very far apart in age. And like, that is one of the hardest things at this age is like, if you let yourself slide even the littlest bit, it just catches up to you. It's so hard. And it's so hard to recoup the losses, I think. Right.
For sure. Yeah. It used to be you could do a certain amount of work in the gym and you see improvements. Now you have to do that same amount of work to not lose anything, right?
Yeah.
If you want improvement, you have to put in twice as much work. And so, it's definitely much, much harder. I've said that to a lot of the kids I have in class, because they're all in good shape, and it feels like a lot more people are spending time at the Arc or whatever than when I was going to school. I'm like, don't get out of shape. Just take mistakes. I don't get it. Like I walk around our building and like all these guys are 6'2" and Adonis. It's like, I don't remember that when I was in college at all. So at all. Where do you feel the most vulnerable? I would, it kind of goes back to my kids, like having adult kids, because when you had kids before, you always felt like you could protect them. Like as a parent, you're like, okay, there's some umbrella or whatever I could put them under. I could bring them back in when things got a little tough. Yes, you let them kind of out on their own, but when things got too tough, you could always come in to protect them. As adults, you can't, right? You try to give some guidance, you try to give some help, but as I know we were talking about before, when I was in my 20s, my dad was probably trying to give me help, and I wasn't giving him the time of day because I knew better. I was smarter than him in my mind. And so I think that not, wanting to help, maybe not being able to help, maybe having my help not listened to, it just feels vulnerable, because sometimes you see problems on the horizon. There's nothing you can do about it. But, and you say to yourself, well, people have to kind of learn on their own, but you'd ideally not want that to happen if you could, but it's going to happen. So being able to kind of let that happen and not micromanage the situation, I guess.
Yeah. My son just graduated from Illinois in May and got his first job. He's got his own benefits. He's completely off my dole. And like, I hear what you're saying. Like it's, you have to go, okay, he's doing his thing now. Yeah. And yeah.
It's like, he's like, I want to do this. I wouldn't do that, but go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So what would you say is the hardest thing about being you in today's world?
Kind of talking about that, I don't know if it's impatience or whatever, but I'm definitely the type of person who's, call it multitasking, call it some form of ADD, perhaps. I'm always buzzing around, doing different things, etc. With not as much focus as I'd want. And I think in today's world, with all of the different media, notifications, etc., it becomes so distracting and difficult for me. And then I find, especially when I'm with, whether it's family or friends, you're getting distracted by a device and you're not being present in the situation. I think that's a hard thing for all of us, but it's hard for me too.
Yeah. Presence is impossibly hard today for some reason. I mean, it's probably all the screens, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So Over the course of the conversation, was there anything that surprised you about either something I asked or the way you answered it, or that caught you off guard in some way?
It's a good question. I mean, because a lot of the questions, I don't know if it surprised me, but I did a lot of the questions I would not have expected. It's not usually a conversation that I have a lot. All great questions, and I enjoyed them and feel comfortable talking about it. But yeah, the surprise to me is, and I think it's great to have these types of conversations about these types of subjects, because I think we need to have more of that, because I think in some ways, today's world, we kind of lose sight of the fact of what, what it means to be a successful man in this world, and what that means, how we define that and what that means. And I don't think the definition has changed as much as some would suggest it has changed. I think it's still about, finding that balance and really doing the most towards whatever you're called to do. And I think, so I think, getting to just having to think about that and to think deeply about that is probably the biggest surprise. Positive surprise, though.
Yeah. So that leads, I think, perfectly into the last question. And I think it has become a struggle for a lot of men in today's society. They struggle to find their place. Things have changed a lot. And I think, and for the most part, they've changed for the better. But it's sometimes hard to find your place. So what advice do you have for men who are struggling to find their place in this rapidly changing society?
Well, I just going back to, as a theme that's kind of gone through when I've talked about things is to me, the focus on others. Someone was talking to me about this, and maybe it was something that kind of came up from one of the kids' summer camps or whatever. But it's, the way you find joy is, and joy, you break it down, and it's Jesus, others, and you is the JOY. Mm-hmm. And if you have that focus on your faith first and foremost, and because of that focus on your faith, you're going to be more focused on other people than yourself. I think that is what really helps you find that balance, find the right priorities, find the right people to be with. Whether that's people in terms of a significant other, or that's people in terms of the groups and organizations that you're part of. To me, that's what's helped me find happiness and joy is really starting with faith and then focused on others, and then finally kind of focusing on myself last. That is to me, and I think I focused on that faith aspect because I think you can kind of look back through history, but we can just look back through the very short history here in the US or Europe or wherever. I think as we've kind of gotten away from that faith that we had in the 50s, and people talk about the idealistic time in the 50s, I think there's a lot of things about, I wasn't around in the 50s, but there's a lot of things right now that I think were probably better than the 50s, and in terms of from a materialistic standpoint. But I think one thing that really made that feel probably like a little bit more of a golden era was that people had a little bit more focused on faith. It's because they just had come through 2 world wars and lost a lot of people. And that usually kind of focuses people. And I think we haven't necessarily come through world wars, but we've come through a lot of difficult times, whether it's a global pandemic or a financial crisis or all sorts of other things. The thing that brings us apart is all the secular problems of the world. And I think the thing that would unite us is more of a focus on faith. And so I think it's helped me, and I think it would help others too.
Yeah, when done right, it really can be this unifying force. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rich. Really appreciate your time. This has been a fascinating conversation. It's been great to get to know you a little bit better, and than just Rich, the finance guy at work. Yeah. So appreciate the time, and as I wish everybody that comes on this podcast, keep up the hard work.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks for having me. Loved having the conversation. Would enjoy having a conversation with you or others offline as well.
Fantastic. Be well.
You can learn more about Illuminate at illuminate.substack.com. We are also streaming on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you at the next episode of Illuminate.